So it is my undeserved pleasure to welcome our presenter, Kevin Heckman. Kevin is the Director of Product Development in the Med Ed unit at the American Medical Association. But what's really important is he is bringing us today about how he melds the habits of a systems thinker and humor. And I think there will be no argument that we could all use a little more humor, a little more laughter, a little more levity. And I think there's some pretty good research that helps us think even better. I'm also delighted to share that Kevin is a graduate of our Advanced Facilitator Credential Program, as many of you on this call are. And it is always a special privilege for us to be able to host the incredible work that you all do as you go out and help our mission of spreading systems thinking capacity. So without taking any more of his time, Kevin, please take it away.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I'm really glad to see so many people jumping on the call, some familiar folks that I definitely need to catch up with. So yeah, I'm Kevin Heckman. I am a graduate, as Sherry mentioned, of the Advanced Facilitator Training. I'm a Senior Atlantic Fellow for Health Equity from the Atlantic Institute. That one is based in DC. I put one of my academic credentials here because people sometimes care. I think the things that are most relevant probably to our conversation, only to warn you of some of the humor that I will use, is I was a professional actor and director, producer, lighting designer for about 20 years before I stepped off and did some other things before landing in my current role. So there's gonna be some theater humor in here. Apologies for that. This also slide includes a picture of my beautiful wife, Chris, and me trying to eat her bouquet, and my two great kids, Jay and Ariana, who are rising seniors. And so systems stuff that we're thinking about has a lot to do with college right now as a family. So it's an exciting time. So these are my goals for our time together. This kind of happened by accident. So for those of you who are at all familiar with the work of the American Medical Association and how it connects with systems thinking, we are a huge proponent of teaching health systems science in medical school. And health systems science is in many ways the implementation of systems thinking in the context of delivering care. Systems thinking is a core piece of it, and the Water Center has been incredibly supportive and helpful in our efforts to get more and more medical schools on board with teaching systems thinking and health system science. And we had a group of scholars there, and I was unexpectedly asked to say something to them ahead of time with no preparation whatsoever. It was completely, as the improv folks would say, I was pimped, which means prompted with no warning. And as it happened, I had a joke in mind that I was like, I was just thinking, like, this joke actually ties into systems thinking in a number of interesting ways, especially on the habits. So I told the joke and talked through the habit connections, and people really liked it. It was a great kickoff to the meeting. I was like, oh, there might be something there. And that's how I started thinking about the ways in which humor can help introduce the habits of a systems thinker. So I want to do that today, provide a few examples, tell a few jokes, share a few videos, and hopefully brighten your mornings or afternoons wherever you are. So why humor? Like, this was just my instinct, and I acknowledge that I'm a former performer and have had to tell jokes in a variety of settings before in front of a lot of people. So of course I think that's a good idea, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a good idea. And so I did a little bit of research, and this was the best source that I found. This was a survey of research that's happened over 5 decades on the use of what they call instructional humor. It appeared in Frontiers of Psychology last year, and I liked this quote from the conclusion, which is, and this is all sourced in the actual article, which has a link at the bottom. That's from PubMed, but I included it because it allows free access to the entirety of the article with no paywall. So laughter acts as a catalyst for active and focused thinking. A number of the studies they reviewed supported the idea that course-related humor, especially humorously illustrating a concept, actually helps people retain information about the concept because the mind tends to prioritize the retrieval of humorous information over non-humorous content. So It turns out that the literature backs up my instinct, which was good to see because I don't know what I would have done if I had found this and it had actually shot me down. Um, a couple of important points, though, that are raised in this paper and in a number of the studies they looked at that I think are good to say. The first, and for the purposes of using this as an instructional tool, one of the most important points, the learners have to get the joke. So depending on the ages that you're dealing with, depending on the cultural backgrounds of the individuals in the room, especially if you're in a room with a variety of cultural backgrounds, that can be a bit of an obstacle to coming up with the right kind of humor to share that everybody can appreciate fully. Because if they don't, then they might misunderstand the point you're making and therefore misunderstand the content, or they can become disassociated from the teaching because they are like, I don't get what's going on. And so they sort of check out. Um, Alongside that, adversarial humor that makes the learner somehow like feel like they're the butt of the joke, definitely does not work. I don't think that should be a surprise to anybody of the educators who are on the call, because again, that creates an adversarial sort of situation. People check out. Um, and what the studies found, and this was mentioned in the quote, was that it is especially effective when it is tied directly to the material. So my goal in the next few slides is to use a few examples, some jokes, some videos, and so forth, to actually illustrate examples specifically of the habits of a systems thinker. Although I think one could dive deeper into this if that was their intent. Um, Couple of disclaimers. When I've used this approach, it has been with adults. This has been primarily people at the American Medical Association or the medical schools that we work with. So my examples definitely come from that lens. Um, I should say everybody's sense of humor is different, right? We all have a great sense of humor, but it is not necessarily everybody else's sense of humor. So if any of my jokes or material shared fall flat, that is a problem with the material, not necessarily with the concept, I hope. And finally, sort of sub disclaimer to the last one, I really like British humor. I find it very funny. So two of my four examples are from British sources. No Monty Python, which I know can be controversial for people. But I just want to say that up front. And so your mileage may vary on some of this. So let's start with a joke. A duck walks into a grocery store, walks up to the manager and says, "Hey, you got any duck food?" And the manager says, "No, we don't have any duck food. And what's more, we don't allow ducks in here, so get out." And the duck leaves. Well, the next day, the duck comes back into the grocery store, goes up to the manager, and goes, "Hey, you got any duck food?" And the manager goes, "No, we don't have any duck food. And if I see you in here again, I'm going to nail your feet to the floor, so get out." So the duck leaves. Well, the next day, very same duck goes back into the grocery store, goes up to the manager and goes, "Hey, you got any nails?" And the manager goes, "No, I don't carry nails." And he goes, "Ah, you got any duck food?" Hopefully you're all laughing. Um, so short little story driven bit of humor, but there were some habits at play here. So you can raise your hand, or if you want to just drop them in the chat, do that. What were some habits as you think back to that story that's this duck trying to get duck food out of this grocery store manager? What were some habits that you would say were in play? I've got the full 14 on here, although I recognize it might be a little small to read. Yeah, shifting perspective to increase understanding, right? For sure. Right? The duck surfaces and tests assumptions. It checks out. Can you follow through on the threat that you gave me? System structure informs behavior, 100%. Yeah. Making the meaningful connection that kind of goes with the surfacing and testing assumptions, right? Like, all right, if you don't have nails, and I've never seen nails in here, then you can't probably follow through. Seeks to understand the big picture, cause and effect, for sure. Yep. All right. Thank you for sharing that. The access to the habits card if people don't have them in front of them. Um, Consider and consequences. Oh, short-term, long-term, and unintended consequences of actions. 100%. Yeah. So I think all of these are true. These were four that I thought were worth mentioning. We've talked about surfaces, intent, and test assumptions. You brought up meaningful connections within and between systems. circular nature of complex cause and effect relationships. It is difficult to get a truly complex cause and effect relationship into a joke, but many jokes have cyclical structures, right? This one does. There's this every day, come back, we repeat an action, we get a result. We come back the next day, we repeat the action, we get a similar result, and so forth. So it's not a bad way to introduce this idea of circular behavior. Um, a lot of jokes are structured that way. So that actually makes them decent vehicles for introducing something that can be fairly complicated, I think, for people, especially if they've not been exposed to the habits before, to wrap their heads around. Time delays is a part of this story, right? On day two, we get the threat. It's not till day three, when the duck presumably has gone away and thought about that threat a little bit, that they come back and the payoff happens. So there's a natural time delay built into this joke that I think also can be useful. These are not the only four by any means. These are just four that I thought were interesting to highlight. Any immediate questions, reactions before I jump? Oh, otherwise, I'm going to tell another joke. So this is your chance to stop me. Nobody's stopping me. I'm going to tell another joke. This one's a little longer. Um, so, oh yeah, I like that, Tracy. That the duck is building a structure, building a system, frankly, through their interactions with the store manager that has certain expected behaviors and results, which can then bring in the habits. I like that. All right, so the Pope. The Pope is flying into New York City to do a big public mass at Central Park. Thousands of people are waiting for him. Unfortunately, at the last minute, his plane is diverted, and instead of landing at LaGuardia, where everybody's waiting for him, where there's a motorcade to take him to Central Park, he is forced to land at the last minute at Kennedy, which is on Long Island, not anywhere near LaGuardia. So the Pope lands from his private plane. Nobody's waiting for him. He has 30 minutes to get to Central Park. He comes running down off the plane, running out to the off the plane, runs out to the cab stand. Right, the pontiff robes are flapping in the wind, big hat. Goes up to the first taxi cab, and the driver looks at him. He says, "Please, please, I have to get to Central Park. I have 30 minutes." And the driver just laughs. It's like, there's no way that you can get from here to Central Park. It's not possible. I'm really sorry, but no. So he goes to the next cab and he says, please, please, I have to get to Central Park. It is extremely important. I have half an hour. And the driver's like, I'm really sorry, but there's no way. It's not possible to get from here to there in that time. I'm really sorry, Your Eminence, but I can't do it. So he goes up to the third cab and he knocks on the window, and the cab driver opens it up and looks at him. He's like, please, please, I have to get to Central Park in 30 minutes. Thousands of people are waiting for me. Please, can you help me? And the driver goes, I could, but if I get another ticket, I'm going to lose my license. And if I lose my license, I lose my job. I can't risk that. I'm really sorry. At this point, the Pope has no options available to him. So he starts begging the man. And finally, the driver's like, all right. I'll tell you what. I'll get in the back. You drive the car and I'll give you directions. And if you do that, I can get you to Central Park in 30 minutes. The Pope, lacking alternatives, agrees. So the Pope climbs in behind the wheel. The taxi driver goes into the back of the car, starts giving directions. They pull out of there. They're cutting through side streets. They leave Long Island. They go into New York City. It's all going really well, but at the last minute, they get pulled over by a cop. So this New York City police officer walks up alongside the car. He raps on the window unrolls, and it's the Pope. So the cop's like, oh, excuse me, just wait right here. I gotta call this in. So he goes back to his car. He gets in. He gets on the radio with the sergeant who's on duty. He's like, Sarge, I pulled someone over, and someone kind of important. And the sergeant's like, what'd you pull over the mayor? He's like, no, Sarge, it's bigger than the mayor. He goes, what'd you pull over, like the governor? He goes, no, Sarge, it's bigger than the governor. And the sergeant goes, you pulled over the president of the United States of America? Are you out of your mind? He's like, no, Sarge, it's bigger than the president. And the sergeant goes, bigger than the president? What's bigger than the president? And he says, I don't know, but the Pope's his driver. Let that land. All right, same question. What habits are in play here? I did my best. My accent work is not what it used to be when I was doing this professionally. Mental models, 100%. This is a great mental models example, right? The important person's in the back, the driver's in the front. Even though it's the Pope, the person in the back must be more important. Assumptions, 100%. Considers an issue fully, which nobody does in this situation, right? There are probably alternative approaches that could have been taken, but everybody's just moving fast and they're not thinking it through. Changes perspectives to increase understanding. Again, would go with that moment of taking that breath of like, what's going on here? It'd be a much less funny joke, but taking that breath of like, why would we be in this situation? And maybe the cop is in a better state of mind at that point. All right, let's jump to a few. Mental models we talked about. I like that structure generates behavior, right? So they're out of their system unexpectedly. And so they are problem solving very fast and using the structures that are in place in order to do that, which is what leads to the Pope driving a cab as the solution. Mental models is definitely the number one here. I think short-term, long-term, and unintended consequences I like for here, honestly, because the decision to have the Pope drive with the man in the back, clearly nobody's really thought about like what does happen if we get pulled over. What happen can the Pope drive? Does the Pope have it? It's a question that I actually wonder about now. Like, does the Pope have a driver's license? Probably not. Right? Usually probably has somebody driving for him. And that leads to some unintended consequences because of that. Using system structure to identify possible leverage actions. So they come up with a unique solution to the problem. The driver could get him there but can't drive. The Pope needs to get there, and they realize what we have actually are pieces of what we need. We're just assuming that they have to be in the same like standard order, and by changing it up, we're able to actually try to solve this problem. So those are my two jokes. And they are kind of my two jokes. Like my kids know these. The thing that they have in common that I think is worth mentioning is that they're both story jokes. And stories work better because there's just more material in there to think about in terms of how the structure operates. And they both follow some common structures that exist in jokes in general, right? Repetition, the rule of threes, right? Everything's funnier if it happens 3 times. Both of the jokes have that structure in them. And there's probably some work, which I have not done, and so I'm not going to talk about it in any great length, but I encourage you to look into if you think this is fun, which is thinking about the structure of humor, which is a system, right? Humor has, especially humor when you're share cultural touch points, there are structures to humor that we recognize and see, and that create systems that build expectations. And most of humor is about building an expectation and then breaking the expectation in an unexpected way. So these are both nice intros. That's how I've mostly used them. I suspect they could be done like you could diagram some of these. You could like build these out into more complete lessons. My next example is a short sketch. This is a just under 3-minute sketch. This is from a show called the Mitchell and Webb Look, I believe. And the sketch is titled, Are We the Baddies? And one of the things I like about this is it goes from illustrating some examples of habits that we had in the 2 jokes, to one of the 2 characters in the sketch using habits to actually analyze their problem. So as you watch this, look at it particularly with that perspective. What habits are being used by one of the 2 actors as they consider their challenge? Hopefully link and sharing works.
Very well. They're coming. Now we'll see how these Russians deal with a crack SS division.
Hans?
Have courage, my friend.
Yeah. Hans, I've just noticed something.
These communists are all cowards.
Have you looked at our caps recently?
Our caps?
The badges on our caps. Have you looked at them?
What? No. A bit?
They've got skulls on them. Have you noticed that our caps have actually got little pictures of skulls on them?
I don't,
Hans, are we the baddies?
Right, let's see. We should be able to hold them at this point here, at least for a few hours.
Why skulls, though?
What?
Why skulls?
Well, maybe they're the skulls of our enemies.
Maybe. But is that how it comes across? I mean, it doesn't say next to the skull, you know, yeah, we killed him, but trust us, this guy was horrid.
Well, no, but...
I mean, what do skulls make you think of? Death, cannibals, beheading, pirates.
Pirates are fun.
I didn't say we weren't fun, but fun or not, pirates are still the baddies. I just can't think of anything good about a skull.
What about pure Aryan skull shape?
Even that is more usually depicted with the skin still on. Whereas the Allies...
No, you haven't been listening to Ally propaganda. Of course they're going to say we're the bad guys.
But they didn't get to design our uniforms. And their symbols are all, you know, quite nice. Stars, stripes, lions, sickles.
What's so good about a sickle?
Well, nothing. And obviously, if there's one thing we've learned in the last 1,000 miles of retreat, it's that Russian agriculture is in dire need of mechanization.
Tell me about it.
But you've got to say, it's better than a skull. I mean, I really can't think of anything worse as a symbol than a skull.
A rat's anus?
Yeah, and if we were fighting an army marching under the banner of a rat's anus, I'd probably be a lot less worried, Hans.
Okay. So...
So, two of them having this conversation, right? One of these SS officers having a bit of a crisis upon the realization that maybe their uniforms indicate that they are not the good guys in this situation. What habits does he utilize as he is thinking through this problem? Changing perspective, right? He takes the perspective of outside people. Yep. Seeks to understand the big picture. This is a good big picture one. I'm always wary of the big picture habit. Everybody says they're good at it. And I think when you drill down, people don't. But he really does like zoom out and say, like, in the grand picture, surfaces assumptions, right? Like, it's just being accepted by the people around him to the point where the guy's actually knitting a scarf with a skull on it. Think I had one other, whoops, I jumped ahead. Considers an issue fully. Mental models 100%. Like, I mean, they're symbols, right? Symbols are built around mental models. And it sets up the joke about Russian agriculture in the 40s, which I appreciate. Accumulations can, I don't know if you want to jump on Mike. I'm curious how you would illustrate that from the sketch. I think that's a cool, interesting idea.
Well, I haven't trained as a systems thinker with the Waters Institute, but I'm looking at these cards. So accumulating the evidence of the scarf plus the ashtray plus the
Yeah.
well,
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, right? They start with a conversation, but then they start looking around themselves and be like, wow, this is really ubiquitous. This is like everywhere here. That's a good point. Until they reach a tipping point, and then they're clearly out of there. I like considers an issue fully for this one as well. Resist the urge to come to a quick conclusion, because there's this implicit time passing between the conversation initially at the sandbags to the table, when he sort of brings it back. Like, he's clearly been thinking about it for a while and then brings it back as something that's really bothering him. So I think that is a nice example of somebody actually utilizing the habits within the sketch. Let's see how we're doing time-wise. Oh, we're doing great. Okay, I have one other example. This is a little bit longer. These are going to be 3 clips from a show called The Goes Wrong Show. Is anybody familiar with The Goes Wrong Show? Okay. obscure. This is a theater people show for 100% sure. So the premise of the Goes Wrong show is the Cornell Polytechnic Drama Society, which is kind of a community theater in England, does this live televised play in front of a studio audience, and then it's broadcast to the nation. It's part of their introduction on every show. The sketch, or the episode that I'm going to be pulling from is called "A Trial to Remember." So it is based around a trial that is happening in the course of the play. And one of the things I like about it from a system standpoint is they repeat the same scene 3 times. So there's a scene where the murder happens, and you see it over and over and over as new information arises. So I'm not including any of the setup that shows why new information arises. Just know that the changes that happen are because you've learned things in the course of the trial. And of course, the central premise of the Goes Wrong show is in the title. Things go wrong. And what makes it really fun from a systems thinking standpoint is the things that go wrong are less about like the actors making mistakes or not being good at their jobs, although there is some of that, and more about the environment betrays them. The design of the set, the sound, the lighting, whatever, doesn't work the way it clearly was meant to. There's been some fundamental mistake that's happened, and they go ahead anyway. So you really get to see these actors trying to do the scene straight in an environment that is not helping them. So I also use this actually as an example of why we need systems thinking, because you will watch these 2 actors in this scene constantly try to struggle with the fact that they don't have around them what they actually need to do the scene. A quick bit of theatrical just jargon, because it might be a little bit helpful. They use in the scenes wagons that show 2 halves of a set that are brought together on stage to create the environment in which the actors will portray. This becomes particularly important as things go wrong. And this is a nice one to think through, like, okay, we have a problem that emerges in the course of this. What habits could we bring to bear to actually solve this problem that they have that will be unveiled over the course of the 3 scenes? So think about it with that context in mind. We'll do the first scene where things go more or less as intended with a few exceptions. That is the scene as it was more or less intended to go, with a few errors, obviously. Okay, so there's some other parts to the show. A little bit more information is learned, and we return to the scene to witness the murder with this new perspective. So, obviously, not the set they were expecting. One more version of this, the final version, which gives some of the actual reasons for the murder. But needless to say, the set challenges only continue. So there are 3 scenes. So let's identify, first of all, what are the problems here that need to be, that leaving aside some of the acting choices and so forth, like what could we fix that would help these actors do the scene more successfully? Gary, I see you don't go to much theater. Big picture, yeah. Structure generates behavior for sure. One of the things I like to point out, especially to medical audiences, medical educators, that 3rd scene where he comes in on the stairs and he makes it down and the audience kind of applauds that. People in medicine end up in that situation all the time where they succeed despite the system. And that's kind of celebrated. When in fact, really what we should be doing is pointing out the fact that the system is not supporting them the way it's supposed to, and that needs to be addressed. Testing equipment. So one of the things that's going on here clearly is this was supposed to be that living room set from the first scene every time. Obviously, that wasn't showing up, right? Something's happening backstage. Successive approximation would definitely be a part of that, right? Like figuring that out. Why is this failing backstage? Is it misunderstanding on the part of the crew? Is the backstage area not sufficient? Is it not organized properly? Did they not figure out how to move these big set pieces around each other in the offstage area? There's a lot going on here, and you don't really know. When we can only hypothesize what would be going on. But again, the ones I like to point out. So system structure generates this behavior, right? The actors need permission to adapt. They clearly they're trying to do exactly the show the way they rehearsed in the face of an environment that is obviously not supporting them. And we see that all the time in regular systems, right? People continue with behaviors that are counterproductive, that don't work the way they're supposed to, that create unintended consequences. Because the system has changed somehow, and nobody's ever changed the way in which people interact with it. So that's a big one. There's clearly an observation going on. This problem gets worse as the show goes along, right? It works the first time, more or less. Second time, one side makes it, but the other side has the wrong. And by the third time, it's completely a mess backstage. Clearly, nobody has figured out how to solve this problem. So watching this elements, how they change over time, and the accumulation of error and what that does to the problem is clearly can help us figure out, like, why does it get worse over time? What's happening behind the scenes to make this happen? And then somebody had mentioned successive approximation. Absolutely. Like we're going to have to experiment to figure this out. And, again, this is supposed to be a live broadcast, so it's clearly not going to happen. But if we were going to try to solve it, that would be the solution. And frankly, if we really get into it, and this is a little in the weeds theatrically, I guess, but they should be rehearsing with this stuff. So why are they not rehearsing with this stuff to figure this out so that they can get it right when it counts most? They are discovering errors in the moment that ideally would have been discovered in preparation, which is another common systems problem, right? Like we don't troubleshoot, we don't red team systems. And so we find the problems too late because that hasn't been built in to our process. Okay, sorry, jumping ahead slightly. So I like this example. It is helpful, obviously, to have an example that illustrates a system. Like I'm have a theatrical background, so I can talk with a little bit more structure around that idea. But I like this as a culmination because it really is about like, and if we had more time, we could sit down and diagram it out and say, this is the backstage. These are the pieces. We know there are this many of them. What could be the problem? We can start to really think about like, how would we solve this? What systems are in play? And then you can take it one step back to being like, how did we arrive at a place where this level of error is happening? Errors happen, right? Like the thing with the blood pack not working the way it's supposed to, that just can happen, right? That could have worked every time in rehearsal and it doesn't work when it counts. That you can't put anybody and blame on that necessarily. But the set, that should have been figured out ahead of time. So those are my 4 examples. I will also point out one of the challenges I set for myself when I chose the examples for this presentation was I wanted to hit all 14 habits. So this actually, I succeeded. I was very proud. I actually I was able to have a decent conversation about each of the 14 habits with just those 4 examples. And frankly, with your suggestions in the chat, probably could have done it with 3, right? You were more expansive than I necessarily was in your suggestions. So I think there's a lot of potential to this as you find pieces of content that you think are particularly speak well to this approach, that you think whatever your learners might really respond to. I think it has a lot of potential. I wanted to just quickly address, I'm almost done, but I wanted to quickly address a couple of other sources of humor that when I asked around a handful of people, like these are the content areas, or these are the genres, I guess I should say, of humor that I'm going to use in presentation. What am I missing that were brought up? 2 in particular. One is memes. Now, part of this is going to be my bias. I don't like memes very much. I think that they are really simplistic, and they tend to be very context specific. So they're not bad for like mental models, right? They'll trade on that on occasion. Some of you might have a better meme game. You definitely have a better meme game than me, because mine is not existent. So some of you may find better ways to use memes, but I really struggled to try to find good ones that were more than like a single habit. I think part of it is that they're very concise, right? Like it's a one hit and go kind of joke. So a lot of times they play off of an opposite, or they play off of like what you know the reaction should be and what the reaction is in the meme or whatever, like this, right? Like I'm 39 and I feel great, when the picture is obviously somebody who is not. So personally, not a fan, although I'm open to hearing from people who find good ways to use them. I do really like comics, but I also need to acknowledge that I'm kind of old, and grew up at a time when people read comics, and like my kids don't read comics at all. Um, I just included, I happen to find this particular strip funny, and I also will take any opportunity to share XKCD, which is the website that this comes from. These are great educational comics. They tend to be very smart and very funny, and they're Creative Commons, so they are open to use. There's obviously a link in the reference below. I think comics can work because they they tell small stories. So again, there's a little bit more to hook on to for this one. So, in this situation, this person has a thing and they have a hypothesis, like maybe I can use this to see hydrogen escaping from blimps. In order to do that, I'm going to have to cause hydrogen to escape from a blimp. Clearly, some utilization of fireworks was involved. And now there's some advertising company whose blimp is probably crashing. But the important thing is he's figured out that they actually use helium, not hydrogen. And so his H alpha filter is not going to be of use. It took me literally, I think it was either 3 or 4 presses of random on the site to find this strip. And I had 2 of the other 3 that I found also were pretty decent examples. This was the one that made me laugh out loud when I read it, which is why I included it. So I think that might be a good source. But other, Calvin and Hobbes has lots of systems, right? Calvin Ball itself is like a fascinating system to think about if you're a fan of Calvin and Hobbes. Again, you want to find what is most appropriate to you. And that, I think, yeah, that's it. That's what I got. Open to any questions, thoughts, feedback. I'm going to stop sharing. Whoops, I want to leave the meeting. I'm going to stop sharing so that we can see each other a little bit better. Yeah, any questions, feel free to put in chat, raise your hand. If you have ideas for other sources of humor or that occur to you that I haven't mentioned, I'd love to hear that too. Shel Silverstein poems. Interesting. I think that's good, though. There's a lot of structure built into his poetry, at least the ones that immediately come to mind. It's been a minute since I read any Shel Silverstein. And obviously, it'd be more age appropriate for certain groups.
I should raise my hand. Matthias first.
Matthias?
Yes, hi. Thank you. That was so nice. I'm in this quest of finding my voice while teaching.
Matthias, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're very quiet and I'm having a hard time hearing you. I can kind of hear you, but not well enough to hear what you're saying. Okay. You want to put it in the chat if you like. We can respond that way. Sheldon learned to swim. Okay. Is that Big Bang Theory? Is it Young Sheldon? One of those shows? Is that what is being referenced?
Big Bang Theory. Big Bang Theory. Sheldon learns to swim on the floor of his room.
Awesome. That's a great one. I love that idea. And I think that's not a show I've watched a ton, but I've definitely watched some episodes. And I think there's a lot of conversation, right, about how different systems interact in the course of that show. Anna Marie.
I did my dissertation on improv theater. So improvisation, I wasn't thinking about it as systems thinking, but it's all, it wouldn't take too many improv scenes to start seeing systems, I think.
No, and one of the things that's really interesting about improv as a structure, depending on whether you're talking, like there's lots of different kinds of improv, long form, short form, game based, what have you. But they all have rules. They are all systems. Part of what makes improv work is that you add some rules to create a system so that behavior is constrained in certain ways, that then allow the improvisers to focus within that. So I actually think that could be a really fascinating way to talk about systems thinking by starting with improv and then talk about like what is the system that we've created? How does that change how we behave? If I change this rule, what happens downstream as we do the improvisation?
One of the pieces of data that I didn't expect to find, I was video recording backstage. When they were warming up, they made up new games, but like on the fly, and didn't communicate the rules. I mean, you learned the rules by playing the game,
Yeah.
and it happened that there were new people and there were more experienced people, and so I was able to watch like misunderstandings and then like how those got repaired or not,
Yeah,
and
that's fascinating.
it was kind of fun.
Yeah, I love that. This is not a humor thing, but it makes me think there are board games or card games. So one of my daughters is particularly fond of a game, which I'm forgetting the name of now. But the premise is that you sit down and nobody knows the rules except for the person who starts the game. And you have to figure out the rules by playing the game with the person. And then as you win a hand, you get to add a new rule, which you also do not communicate. So it's only unearthed in the course of like breaking it, which is an interesting structure. Yeah, Tracy.
So Kevin, my takeaway, and it was just like this light bulb that went on when we were doing the 3 series, is that the 3 series video is that humor and the stories that that cause one to laugh and enjoy the situations is a safe like door to open to help people look at their own systems. And so when
Yeah.
you asked us to think which habits did you see practiced, I was thinking that a next step after that is, and where do you see that this happening, similar things happening in your own system? And so it's just a wonderful way to lower the risk of talking about what's really going on. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate
That's great. Yeah, I'm going to be doing in a couple of weeks. I'm doing a presentation for a different unit at the AMA who's asked me to come talk about systems thinking. And I'm in discussions now about the cases that we're going to use. And you're making me think like I should like the cases that people tend to come up with when you ask them for cases are specific examples from their work or from the news or what have you. And now I'm like, maybe we need to come up with some just comedic situations as our cases that then we can tie back afterwards. I'll have to think about that. I've got a couple of weeks, so I've got some time to try to figure that out. Scrubs is a great, I mean, because healthcare is such a system heavy environment. Um, Another one that I really like for systems thinking is The Good Place. I'm not sure how well it works unless you know The Good Place, though. That's why I didn't use it. Like when they get into the actual structure of what's like how heaven is working, and for those of you who don't know, I apologize. This is a sort of mild spoiler, but how interconnectedness affects the evaluation of somebody as being good or not good, and the way in which that system has stopped working because of globalization, frankly. It's a really fascinating example of how systems thinking comes into play. I also love it because the takeaway conclusion is that we need formative, not summative evaluation for the whole show, which is just kind of a delightful place to land for a show. Esoteric and still really funny and accessible. Any other questions? Otherwise, I will hand it back. All right. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. This was really fun for me to do. I hope it was fun to observe and listen to. And I will hand it back to Sherry.
Oh, Kevin, thank you, thank you, thank you. It was very delightful to listen to, and again, really good thought-provoking content that can help us all as we do that. I will take just a minute to come and share a couple of announcements that The next open studio is going to be another AFC grad, Natalie Coors. Dr. Coors is the senior lecturer at University of Florida in the College of Agriculture and does several incredible projects, but many of them center around travel students, opportunities for students, and doing some mapping of systems in order to solve really complex problems. So she's going to be sharing some of the things that she has learned for really making those study abroad programs for her students focused on systems and helping them think about some of the problems that can be solved. So if you were duly impressed with Kevin, and I know you will be with Natalie as well, and are interested in becoming an advanced facilitator candidate and eventually graduate, we do have applications open now. Our next cohort 12. We started this at the very beginning of 2021, and this will be our 12th cohort of graduates, over 200 individuals who've completed the program. Many of you on the call today are in that community of practice, and we welcome you and just appreciate that you stay close. Allison Smith, who recently joined our team, some of you may have seen that on our notifications. Allison is updating the coaching portion of the program, so it will be International Coaching Federation aligned. And for those of you who've completed, we'll have more information about how you can catch up with some of that coming. So deadline is August 1st. Please apply, and we will communicate more information about that. Also, we have some of our workshops this summer. Leading for Impactful Change is about a 6-hour opportunity to practice your systems thinking. Foundations of Systems Thinking is happening 2 more times this summer in July, and then a 2-part session. That one, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. Pacific time, is designed to appeal to some of you in Europe and across the pond to make that a little bit more appealing. And then we have one more. This is one of my favorites. We talked about accumulations. And it's just a fun one. Really, accumulation is story. And so that will be happening in September. You can register on our website. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's always a delight. And if we don't see you before, hopefully we'll see you at that August open studio. First, we'll be back on the first Thursday of the month, which is our usual practice. It was just changed because of the holiday this month. So thank you. And we'll look forward to being with you all again. Have a great rest of your day or evening. Thank you again, Kevin. That was amazing.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.